If you love podcasts and you speak Dutch, there is no way that you could have missed Bob, or rather Den Bob, which is impossible to translate. An amazing series, a groundbreaking Dutch or Flemish co-production podcast. It's a 6-part series about an elderly lady and her secret life that might have actually happened, but might also be a figment of her imagination. And these 3 young women tried to sort it out. They were awarded with a tegel. A warm round of applause for Mirke Kist, Siona Houthuys en Nele Eeckhout.
Hi. Yes. Hi, thank you all for being here today. So I am Mirke, this one is Nele, and the last one is Siona. And together we are called Audiocollectief SCHIK, or SCHIK in English, maybe. So our podcast, Bob, it has been our greatest, but also our most challenging project so far. And I mean, it has been a very long and a very amazing, but also a very frustrating process at times. And right now, we just want to tell you about some of the problems, but also some of the epiphanies we had while building Bob. But we first would really love to introduce you to Elisa, the woman that it is really all about.
Maar je vergeet zoveel. En ik vind dat zo spijtig, hè? Dat ik zoveel vergeet, hè? Dat is echt waar, hè?
Dit is Elisa.
Allee, alles hetgeen dat ik nog weet, dat vond ik plezant en goed en ja.
Elisa is 84 jaar.
Ja. 84 jaar, ja.
Op je 84ste, dan is het niet zo gek dat je dingen vergeet of niet meer alles zo scherp hoort.
Mijn naam is Siona.
Iona.
Nee, Siona.
Fiona.
Met een S, ja.
Ik ben dus Siona. Ik ben op bezoek bij Elisa, samen met Nele en Mirke.
Mirke.
Met?
Mirke.
Lieveke.
Ja.
Lieveke.
Ja, en dit is Nele.
Nee.
Ik ben Nele.
Nee.
Nele.
Nee.
Nele.
Lea.
Nele, zie.
Nele.
Ja.
Oh, dat is goed.
We zijn 3 radiomakers en we zitten met een opnameapparaat rond dit klein vrouwtje. We zijn op bezoek bij Elisa in Pniel. Dat is een christelijk rusthuis op een half uurtje rijden van Antwerpen.
Ja.
Zijt hier gelukkig, zo in het rusthuis?
Ja, ik ben hier gelukkig. Dat is waar.
Ze zou elk onze grootmoeder kunnen zijn, Elisa. Met haar grijze haar, zijdezachte dunne huid, pantoffeltjes, verrimpelde handen. Een van de duizenden krimpende mensjes in een rusthuis. Maar Elisa is niet onze grootmoeder. En geen van ons 3 heeft zulke heldere, blauwe ogen als die van haar. Wie die ogen wel heeft, is Carrie, haar dochter. Carrie is degene die ons aan haar moeder heeft voorgesteld.
Mijn moeder is Elisa Aert, maar zo werd ze nooit genoemd. Zij werd Lisette, of wordt nu nog altijd Lisette genoemd.
Carrie vertelde ons over die blauwe ogen van haar moeder die de laatste tijd zo hevig opflakkeren.
Ja.
Elke keer als Carrie langskomt, vertelt haar moeder hetzelfde verhaal. Een verhaal waar Carrie tot voor kort nog nooit van had gehoord. En waardoor ze haar moeder ineens door hele andere ogen ziet.
Ik was op bezoek bij haar in het rusthuis en toen begon ze op een bepaald moment te zeggen van dat er vroeger, toen zij nog woonde, weet ik waar, ik denk dat ze de leeftijd had van een puber, 15 jaar, dat er een overbuurjongen was, een buurjongen, naar wie ze altijd zwaaide.
Die zag naar mij.
En die zwaaide terug.
En ik naar hem natuurlijk. Ja, ik was 15 jaar en hij was ook 15 jaar als we alleen elkaar leerden kennen. Ja.
Het is 1947.
Dat is heel lang geleden, hè?
Dat is 70 jaar geleden. Elisa is een meisje van 15 jaar. En hij is ook 15 jaar.
Ja, dat is jong, hè? Maar ja.
Hij was haar buurjongen.
Ja. Die woonde op de Kruislijn en ik in de Wolfjagerslijn. Recht over ons.
Ze woonden in Borgerhout, een deelgemeente van Antwerpen. Hij in de Kruislei en zij op de Wolfjagerslei. 2 straten die elkaar kruisen. Vanuit hun huizen konden ze elkaar zien.
We zagen altijd op elkaar, hè?
Ze wuifden altijd naar elkaar, van achter hun raam.
Ja, dat was plezant, hè? Ja.
Zij was verliefd op hem en omgekeerd. Soms spraken ze zelfs stiekem af in het voortuintje van een leegstaand huis.
Er was een leegstaand thuis met een grote voorhof en dan nog een haag.
In dat voortuintje stond een haag.
Waar kwamen we altijd bij en dan zaten we daar maar te babbelen. Hè. En, dat moeten we dan niet vragen. Nee.
Het is 1947 en 2 pubers zitten achter een haag. Te babbelen en ja...
Echt waar?
Ja.
Onschuldig zwaaien naar elkaar. Minder onschuldig gestoei in de struiken.
Amai.
Ja.
Elisa en de mooie buurjongen van de overkant van de straat.
Ja, als zij jong was, was zij echt mooi, vond hij.
Hij doet haar ogen nog steeds fonkelen als ze aan hem denkt.
Ze begint er altijd opnieuw over. Nu, de laatste weken, maanden, is het elke keer als we op bezoek gaan het verhaal van Bob.
Dan Bob.
Bob.
Bob. Een Bob.
Bob? Ja, zo heet hij.
Bob.
Ja.
Dus dat was mijn vriend. Bob.
Ja.
Ja? Je kent hem ook.
Nee, eigenlijk niet.
Niet?
Niet persoonlijk, nee.
Nee.
Okay. Is this working? Yeah. So, we didn't know this, Bob, but this is where the story takes a turn. Because Elisa gets pregnant by Bob. And this is a big disaster because it's 1947 and she's a 15-year-old girl. So Elisa claims her father sent her away to a small town, Beveren, and she was put into a convent. And there she was forced to give up her baby. We will again listen to a small 2-minute clip of the first episode, and you hear Elisa trying to answer our question. We just asked her what exactly has happened there in the convent right after she delivered her baby.
Maar we weten niet waar dat je dan dat kindje hebt bevallen.
Zie je,
Waar was dat dan?
Dat kindje met geboren bezin. Nee, dat is geboren. Wacht eens, waar is dat geboren?
Waar is dat geboren? Vraagt ze zich af. We proberen haar te helpen. Dat kindje zat eerst in je buik.
Dat kindje zat in mijn buik.
En dan ben je bevallen?
Ja, maar dat weet ik bekend niet. Dat weet ik bekend niet. Nee. Hoe kan dat nou? Het is... Allee. Waar is dat kindje gebleven? Waar is dat?
Waar was dat kindje?
Maar dat wist ik zelf niet. Dat wist ik niet.
Heb je het gezien? Heb je het mogen zien? En heeft Jules...
Ik heb dat kindje niet in mijn handen gehad. Dat eerste. Nee. Dat was een jongensje. Een jongen.
Een jongetje dat geboren is nog voor Carrie, Ilse en Linda. Een zoontje van haar en Bob.
Wat hebben ze met dat kindje gedaan? Er is toch iets mee gebeurd, hè? Maar dat is zo weggestrapt geweest voor mij, hè, dat ik nee, nog altijd denk, ik zou dat toch allemaal willen weten. Je moet toch alles uitpluizen een beetje, hè.
So, okay, you hear her really struggling and trying so hard to remember what exactly has happened there 70 years ago, because now she's 84 and she's forgetful and she's confused, and sometimes she sees things that aren't there, like children sitting in trees and dressed in white because they're marrying there. And these are obviously delusions. These are things that aren't true. But the memories of Bob, they are different. They are so vivid, and she tells about Bob with a strong emotion. So we decided to take her words seriously, although she has a type of dementia. She suffers from dementia. So the big question is, what about these memories? Are they delusions? Are they a product of her aging brain? Or are they real? Is this a secret that is emerging now?
Yeah, so these were the questions we set out to answer. And the journey resulted in a 6-episode podcast we made in collaboration with VPRO Dorst. The international premiere was at ITVA last year in November. And here we see a picture of the live show we created for the premiere. It was a sort of interactive live event. We handed out green voting lights with which people could go from the Bob believer camp to the non-believer camp. It was sort of, we wanted to create like a shared experience of the tension of the podcast itself. Now, in the months after the release of Bob, we received many really heartwarming reactions. People really shared how they recognized their own grandparents in Elisa or connected with the theme of dementia as well as adoption. Particularly touching were those comments of people who were telling us that Elisa's story influenced the way they had their relationship with their own elder relatives, how they changed the way they talked to them, and more importantly, the way they listened to them. But also quite moving, we thought, was when people told us how Bob helped them to discover this alien thing called podcasts, finally discovering this otherwise useless purple app on their phones, and actual 50-year-olds explaining to each other how to download episodes. Because when it comes to the various podcast apps and platforms, it's still a technological hassle a lot of the time for a lot of people. And a truly user-friendly platform like Netflix is yet to be developed. So we were really glad to see that the universal nature of this story really helped in crossing that boundary. And in the meantime, we also stole another Netflix success ingredient, consciously aiming for a true binge listening effect, and we'll tell you more about that later. Because in drawing the Netflix parallel, one thing immediately stands out in the way Bob was built, being completely without visual images. So another reaction we got was this one. I'll translate it roughly. Been listening to this beautiful and emotional story from episode 1, tension, emotion, some humor. The story has it all. One tip for the makers, have this story and its journey filmed. So, great story, just some advice. Please go make an actual movie now. We are radio makers and audio storytellers, so this was never a conscious decision or an issue for us. This is just how we tell our stories. But the truth of the matter is that it is a question worth answering. Why not use camera and film? But because being aware of where the strength of the story matches with the strength of the medium is really important to realize the potential of both. And it led us to define what we think are a few good reasons to keep you in the dark. So this is one visual image gone. One is that visuals can be blinding. One of our goals with this series was to approach dementia in a different way, and not only in how we tackle the story, but also in portraying an 84-year-old woman in a nursing home. because the focus in general visual media is often on the frame is often of the sadness and dullness that is just undeniable, part of a nursing home. Close-ups of wrinkly hands or gray hair or a distant look in the eyes. It's layers and layers of visual signifiers that actually confine this person to their age and maybe sometimes nothing more than that. And we wanted to strip away, and this is possible in audio, to strip away all these visual layers and to really focus on what is going on inside of her mind, and inside of the woman and the girl that is still there. And in listening to hours and hours of tape conversation, we were very much confronted with the way we tend to treat older people. We heard ourselves becoming really impatient or not listening carefully enough to what she was really trying to say. And it was only afterwards in listening that all these mistakes became apparent, and a lot of her emotional truth was actually revealed. Another advantage of working with audio is that you can actually time travel in color. Because if you would visualize Elisa and Bob's street in Borgerhout in the 1940s, only black and white images or sepia tones would be of use. But just like any 70-year-old's childhood memories are played back to them, it's not in black and white, it's in color, just like with you and me. And it's not how Elisa is trying to paint a picture to us. So we wanted to stay away, as far away from that as possible, by also avoiding the audio triggers for a black and white feel, like 1940s music or cracking record sounds or stuff like that. We wanted to be colorful, and we wanted the visuals to be played in your mind just like they would be as if you were digging into your own memory. I'll give you one last reason to stay in the dark when it comes to this story, because the same goes for the image your mind-eyes create for the character of Elisa. By giving her a voice but not a face, her words will be able to resonate much deeper and on a more intimate and personal level. Because if you hear doubt and fear in her voice, and you will think about how that looks like, you will see it on the faces of the people that you love. If you think about her eyes, you will see the eyes of your mother or grandmother, maybe. And if you think about it, the situation where a voice is speaking into your ear is actually a really intimate situation. And so in this intimate listening process, it's possible for one single voice, the voice of Elisa, to become part of a world that only you can see and only you have the visuals for. So this was the promo talk for our medium. Siona will now take you through the search of our own voice in this medium.
Yeah. So when we started building Bob, we had this story, this intriguing story. We had our medium audio storytelling. We had done a part of our research. There was a lot happening. We had different storylines to follow. But the most complex question was at the start, how are we going to tell this story? Because it's so big. And this brings me to our first podcast series that we made together, which is called Roes. And it translates very poorly into intoxication. This is Roes. It was a 4-episode podcast in which we shed light on the different kinds of intoxication by booze, by drugs, by victory, love, etc. And we asked many people to share their experiences and their stories. But the way we hosted their stories was very neat, very neutral and dry. We were shaved and well suited up hosts. So we tried to keep a certain distance to stay objective. So what we did was we would cut ourselves out of the tape. You could never hear us in the scene itself. You could never hear us having a conversation with the interviewee. So we weren't there, actually. We were only present as a voiceover. We were the glue tying all the stories together. And when we finished this production, we realized there was something missing, something really crucial, something that would tie the listener to us and keep him very close to us from the beginning till the end of the series. And so the big question was, how were we going to achieve this in our next production? And this brings me back to Bob. Is it already there? Yeah. When we bumped into the story of Elisa, there was an ongoing fascination about this mystery. You had a deep-rooted curiosity. And during our process of researching and interviewing and having discussions, the three of us, we realized that this was the answer. It was our fascination that would be the core of the narrative. It was our desire to resolve this mystery and to help Elisa finding the answer to her questions. That was the wheel of the story. And so instead of reporting from the outside as reporters, we would put ourselves in the middle of the action as characters of the podcast. And so we could report from what we saw from there, and we would follow our own judgment and discuss our doubts and our concerns and our fears and our assumptions and our angers, etc. So we would include scenes in which we have dinner together and we are discussing what we were thinking at that moment, if we believed Bob was real or not. Or you could sometimes hear us arguing if we didn't agree. So ideally, the goal was to become an avatar for the listener's curiosity. We would ask the questions the listener would want to ask. And in this way, we would connect the listener closer to us as narrators, and they would feel like they get to know us, and they kind of do in a way, because we're real. Okay, we'll know. Yeah, we are real. We'll now listen to a 2-minute clip in which you'll hear Nele speculating about a small side story Elisa always told us. So when she was put into the convent, she met a boy up there, and with him she tried to flee. And we are trying to figure out who this boy is, and maybe he could have been her husband with whom she married later. Jules.
Elisa werd in Beveren dan wel weggehouden van Bob. Ze vertelt steeds dat ze er een andere jongen leerde kennen.
Die was ook in dat klooster omdat hij wou trouwen met een meisje dat ze thuis niet goed vonden.
Allebei gescheiden van hun geliefde, sluiten Elisa en de jongen een vriendschap. En op een dag...
Die bakker die deed nooit niet goed die deuren terugduwen van dat klooster.
Zagen Elisa en de jongen hun kans.
Ja, die jongen en ik, wij zijn gaan lopen. Ja, dat was plezant, hè? Ja.
Als Jules' profiel zo goed past in het klooster van Beveren, moeten we ons dan nog wel afvragen wie die jongen was.
Ah, maar dat degene met wie ze wegliep, dat ons vader was dan?
Dit is Linda nog eens. Ik leg haar deze hypothese voor.
Ah, oké. Zeg, jij bent erg romantisch, hè? Ja. Wie fantaseert er hier eigenlijk? Onze moeder? Of... Ja. Nee, maar dat zou kunnen, ja. Ik weet het niet.
We noemen deze hypothese, het is mijn lievelingshypothese, ook wel de romantische Beveren-hypothese nummer 1.
Gekke is dat je kan honderden hypotheses bedenken zonder...
Zonder dat je er misschien ooit eentje kan bewijzen. En in het geval van de romantische Beveren-hypothese nummer 1, Jules en Elisa leren elkaar kennen in het weeshuis en gaan er samen vandoor, zijn er misschien net iets te veel argumenten tegen te vinden.
Yeah, so what we basically do here is showing parts of the process that normally happen behind the scenes, that are never made public. We actually tell a story of which the core narrative is based on hypothesis. And this is a radically different approach than in traditional journalism. Normally, journalists have a bunch of hypotheses, and they research them all, but they only use the ones that turn out to be valid. But we include them all, also the ones that lead us nowhere or that just turn out to be false. This is done before. This is what happens in the big American podcast series like Serial, S-Town, Missing Richard Simmons, Dirty John, etc. And it's a genre that can be classified as narrative non-fiction storytelling or oral literary non-fiction. Not oral, but oral with a AU. Yeah. So, of course, this phenomenon stirs up a lot of debate. A lot of journalists wonder if this is unethical to expose an audience to potentially unfounded or misleading information, to expose them to speculation and hypothesis, because you're raising doubts about people, truths, and integrity that may turn out to be baseless. This is an ongoing debate that we find ourselves with Bob in the middle of, and is very important to be aware of and to take part of this in this conversation. For us, during our process, what was really important is, or a lot has to do with intuition, communication, common sense, empathy, and combined with constantly redefining a certain deontological code.
Okay, so as Siona just told you, at a certain point, we found a voice, we found our own place in the story. But we were challenged by this idea of, so we had this story, but how were we going to spread it over 6 episodes? Because we made a bunch of audio stories before, audio documentaries, but we never made a series where we told, one story week by week. So we not only had to make 6 really great episodes, we also had to make people want to push that play button, for the next one. We had to, in a way, add this Netflix ingredient, and we had to make people want to binge listen. But what does that mean? Because unlike Netflix, we are working with a real story, with real life, and real life isn't made up of cliffhangers. Shamefully. But so something that was really important for us, we now know, now we have a name for it, is called Withholding Information. And we found this really great quote by a radio producer. And she says, "Withhold information until it can resonate the most deeply. Control the escalation of your piece drop by drop, like channeling water through a dam. Don't flood the opening of the story when the rest of it will be parched." So, not saying everything that withholding information to tell it at a later moment is, of course, a very common way to make books or TV shows or movies very suspenseful. Netflix basically thrives on this. But in journalism, it isn't so common, and it actually kind of feels counterintuitive to, keep information from your listeners when your job basically is to inform them. So, but we knew we had to do this. So how are we going to do this? So building cliffhangers is one way of doing this. And we actually made some bold choices in doing this. We would really just build up to a big reveal. And then right before you got the answer, we would cut off. And you would have to, wait for the next episode to find out what was happening. So building cliffhangers is a very straightforward way of withholding information that I'm sure lots of you know. But there are also more complex ways, which we didn't really, we didn't really have the words to explain what it was. So, but a really great example of that is in the podcast S-Town. I don't know, has anybody here listened to S-Town? Me? Yeah, okay, a lot of people. Yeah. Okay, so in S-Town, it's an American podcast. The host, Brian Reed, he will take you through 7 episodes in which you learn about the mysterious life of one man. But only in the last episode, Brian Reed tells you that this man could possibly be suffering from a very specific medical condition. And the producer, Brian Reed, I mean, he could have chosen to tell you about this medical condition right in the first episode, like when he was characterizing his protagonist, but he deliberately chose not to do this. He deliberately chose to save this, piece of information until the final episode. And by doing this, he was consciously kind of keeping the minds of the listeners open to all the twists and the turns that the story would take. And these twists and turns, you probably would have experienced them very differently if you would have known about this medical condition. And so we, in a way, in Bob, did the same thing, even though it took us a really long time to get there and to understand that we should do this and why we should do this. Because in our first version, we had a very long process of a year. In our first version, Bob looked very differently. So in our second episode, originally there was this interview with a neuropsychiatrist. And this neuropsychiatrist, he told us that there is this condition where people who are suffering from dementia will take a bunch of memories. And some of these memories are real, some of them are from people they know, but also some of them are from television shows or newspapers. And they will take these memories and they will basically create a new story out of them. They will connect them together, and to them, the story feels completely real. So we put this interview in the second episode because we thought, like you see here, this is one hypothesis of what could be happening to Elisa. And to us, this hypothesis didn't really feel that much more or less important than some of the other ones we had. So we were pretty pleased with ourselves. And then we had this pre-listening session where one of our pre-listeners, which is a director called Ralph, and I babysit his kids, so that's how we know him. And he listened to it, and he said to us that, having this piece of information at, this early on in the podcast kind of made him lose interest in the story. He said that everything he heard after was so colored by this very dry and this very medical explanation about what could be going on with Elisa. And even though the diagnosis had never been proven to be true for Elisa, still just knowing that this condition existed so early on really kind of took away of this mystery and kind of in a way killed the story. So we were really wondering, what should we do with this? Could we just leave it out? Is that fair? Because we learned about this condition quite early on in our research. But Ralph said something to us which we repeated to each other a lot. And he said, girls, you have to be naughtier. And I think what he meant was that we have to be bolder. If we want to make these really great productions like S-Town, like Serial, like Missing Richard Simmons, then we have to use the same techniques that they do. And we have to, really make choices to tell the best story possible. So what we ended up doing was we took this information and we moved it all the way from the 2nd until the 5th episode. So, as a listener, you still get all the information we have. You just get it at a later moment. And because you don't get it so early on, it doesn't cloud, your mind. You still have an open mind. And actually, by moving it to the 5th episode, it did the opposite. At that moment, if Bob is real or not. You know a lot about the baby. Did it happen? Did it not happen? But there's still some gaps. And now this condition kind of fills in some of these gaps. But it's not all meaning anymore, which it was before. This turned out to be really important for us. And we also learned from this how important it is to have a set of fresh ears listening to your piece from time to time, because it's so easy to forget or misinterpreted what information really is. Because you always, as a maker, have the whole story. You know all the nuances, but your edit, people who listen to your edit, they don't have that. And so it's so important for them to tell you what your information actually means, because you don't know anymore. So if you know this and you know how to work with withholding information, it's a really good way to make better, I think, and suspenseful series. Do you agree?
I do agree. I was thinking if we would have put it in the first episode, then it would have been a documentary about this condition and not anymore about her, which was our first cause, that it would always be about what's going on with her. So we've kind of let you in on what sometimes felt as performing really intrusive surgery on this story, because deliberately using tools of fiction to shape reality and the lives of non-people sometimes feels awkward. And we had a lot of discussion about that, and we mentioned some ethical doubts before. We noticed that we found ourselves somewhere in the middle between the discussions around S-Town and Serial, because in Serial, the parents of the daughter of the girl that was murdered actually never gave their permission to reopen this case, which is obviously very painful. We had the permission of the daughters of Elisa, so that was our bare minimum. And on the other hand, S-Town, the protagonist, deliberately called up the radio producer and was very glad to talk, but in the end he never got to decide whether he was okay with all the private details and information that were spread about him on a worldwide scale. So we found ourselves somewhere in the middle of these two ethical discussions. And for us, even before Bob, we've kind of built this awareness about the power you have over people's voices into our logo and our name. Because Schik is a reference to in Dutch Schikgodinnen, the three goddesses of fate, the fates, where one spins the life thread, one holds it, and one cuts it. And the cutting is obviously a reference to the process of editing, but it's also an exaggeration of mythological proportions to what we do. As a reminder to of our responsibility towards the people whose stories we tell, and the sort of life or death necessity we feel to tell them. So that was it. Thank you.
Do we do questions?
Some questions, but maybe questions for the room first.
We still have 10 minutes. Great. Yeah.
No, not at all.
Shall I repeat
So
the
the question is whether we set out to look for an old lady, or which is not what we did. We found her through a teacher of ours.
Yeah, it's an important question, but there is no glamorous answer. Carrie, the daughter of Elisa, was our voice teacher at school, at the conservatory where we studied together. And after our study, I worked with Carrie on a small project. And it was in her office that she got a message of her sister. We have a brother, just this sentence. And she asked me, can I call my sister, because this is important. And I heard something in the next room. And then I asked what is happening here, and she told everything. And then when I went home, I had to tell this to my colleagues, friends, and they were there was this alarm bell ringing.
We then started following it week by week, like, did she tell more, and how's she doing, and are we finding out more?
Yeah.
So
in the beginning, we thought that that the baby's name was Bob. Yeah. That's how it started. It was kind of really strange.
Yeah.
But,
So I was forced to every week to ask Carrie how her mother was. And then finally we asked her, can we make this series about her?
In the back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good remark. It's because it's a Flemish story made for also Dutch-speaking people, but in collaboration with VPRO Dorst, which is a Dutch broadcasting company or part of a Dutch broadcasting company, and it was necessary to translate the Flemish accent, which is sometimes not as clear to the Dutch audience,
especially in the first episode, because you get to know her and you get to know her dialect, but. Gradually, but in the beginning it was important to
make everything clear because it's important information, but it's necessary in Dutch. But indeed, it's very
when it's subtitled, it's so stupid. Yeah, but I realized it yesterday as well when we saw
in the back.
Yeah. So we studied something kind of weird. We studied something which is, if you translate it, it's called word art. So it's a study at the Conservatory of Antwerp, at the drama school actually, because it's music, drama, and dances together. And it is a combination of creative writing, acting, and something called media, which is not journalistic training, but it's more like you learn how to interview, how to host a show, how to make radio documentaries, and we also mix all of these things. So we make documentary theater, or you could write for theater. So a lot of people who it's a very small set of studies. So I think we graduated with 5 people. So it's very small, and people go on to do all sorts of stuff. Some people write books, some people go into theater, some people like really work for the radio or become teachers or so. But for us, it was really great because we love to mix all of these things. Like it's all nonfiction, though we're very clear about that. But we are not journalists, we are directors, maybe more
storytellers.
Yeah,
it's all about how to tell theater. A story.
Yeah, but it's a good stage. It's a good technical training, like editing and recording, as well as voice training and all the. It's very different skills, but what ties it all together is really storytelling in all the
essence.
Yeah. Right here.
How did you decide whether in a given moment you're using your own voice or voice of your protagonist? Did you put everything on paper and then like remove it and then put it in order, or how did it?
Yes, everything is scripted, but how did we start?
Well, we do make transcriptions of all the interviews, and then. Yeah, but then you write a script, and then it does not work at all in audio. So then it goes back and forth. But yeah, we work in a different way as well. I need music to start and structure. You add music in the end.
Afterwards,
so yeah.
That's not a good answer, but. That was really stressful,
especially for the 6th episode, for the last episode.
But I was we kept pushing the publication date, and then we were selected for ITFA, the documentary festival, and so we made this show, and on that evening we had to release the first episode. Like there was we just had to. But then so the first 3 episodes were finished, but the 4th, 5th, and 6th weren't, and we worked a lot of 18-hour days. And we made some stupid mistakes as well because of this.
We went to Elisa 2 weeks before the latest episode was published. Yeah.
But it also created something really special because the first episodes were already out, and for the last episode I interviewed Dr. Annetje Bootsma. She is a specialist in elderly care and dementia. And because she heard the first episode, she was really able to reflect on Elisa and on what we were doing, which was really interesting because she was saying stuff like, you're digging into her past and it's probably going to make her, maybe fearful, or it's going to do something to her and you have to be really careful. So that really tied it all together. So in the end, I'm really happy.
And she could guide us. For our last visit, she really guided us in how to treat her. It was really interesting for us.
Yeah. So without spoiling too much for the people who haven't listened,
Who has listened, actually? Oh,
great. Yeah,
I don't know if we can talk about that for the people who are. I know one person here in the front is really doing.
but so far we know nothing new. I can tell you that. So far we know nothing new.
Where the series ends, that is where we still are.
Yeah, but I mean, you never know. You never know.
but Elisa is starting to. Verslechteren. Her condition is
deteriorating. A
Yeah.
little.
Yeah.
Are you still in contact with her?
We went to a restaurant with her, I think 3 weeks ago. We had we wanted to have mussels, but it was not the season yet.
lunch.
But we had a great time with her.
She has a robot cat now that she really likes.
But we still want to keep visiting her, but we don't want to be there like every day and to become too much, because we have become a factor in her life, and we are. She asks about us, so we want to keep it at a. We want to keep her close, but at a distance that is also acceptable for her.
But this Monday we won a prize, and she was really glad for us, and she was, oh yes, the girls. She was so happy.
We decided not to do that because it's obviously her story, but it's also our reconstruction of her story. And as she is constantly in the process of reconstructing her memories, it felt a bit, it felt a bit strange to not let her hear her story by us, but it might be a bit much for her. And we discussed this with her daughters as well.
Yeah, but we told her about it, and we told her it's a big story, and that a lot of people are listening to her. And
you've talked about this a little bit, but there were some ethical issues. The relatives of Bob, some of them didn't want to cooperate. I believe they really thought it was a bad idea that you made the podcast at all. There was, of course, the risk of Eliza.
Spoiler!
Oh, sorry. Oh my God, did I do a spoiler?
We tried. I'm sorry. We did our best.
Oh, so sorry. I can't even finish my question.
Still listen. It's still great.
It's still great.
It's different than what you think now.
It's still great.
yeah, it's all different than what you think.
But that's true.
You were risking disrupting this old lady's life. Were you ever in a position where you thought we should just kill the project? And how did you deal with that?
There was a point at which we weren't sure if we could make it. But then we made some decisions about what we would. There is definitely stuff not in there. It was a bit balancing. How far can we go? We did not use the recordings of their voices. That's one thing.
We don't tell their story.
Yeah. But then also about when you say it's this older woman, you know, she doesn't, because it's true, she doesn't completely realize what we're doing. You know, she is 85 now. She suffers from dementia.
No, I think the question was about.
Yeah, but you also said something about telling this story about the older woman, or wasn't that your question?
Well,
I'm sorry.
no. My question is, if you ever thought, is this story worthwhile? Either disrupting this woman's life or other people's life involved. Forget about what I said earlier.
We tried to make a calculation of what the impact would be in the lives of actual people that are alive still. And then, indeed, on the other half of the scale, the necessity of why this story should be told. And we judged that it should still be told because it's not only about this particular individual, sensational, mysterious case. It's about dementia and stuff that a lot of people deal with, and about a different approach to dementia. And so we decided to that it was absolutely worthwhile.
Because in a way we kind of trick, you know, everybody finds it difficult to talk to people with dementia because it's very difficult. And these people often end up very lonely and very misunderstood. But we kind of trick listeners into, listening to a woman with dementia for 3.5 hours who you don't even know. So I think it's a really great way of raising awareness and you really do. I think you really learn something from it.
And also, a lot of the topic is about the silence of the time and of the 1940s, 50s, and even 60s, 70s, and about not talking about stuff and about suppressing stuff. So deciding to not tell the story would have been more of that, maybe. So, yeah.
Any more questions?
Do we still have time for one more question? One more burning question?
But there are none.
There are none. Then we can just have lunch, right?
Audiocollectief SCHIK, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have to apologize one more time. I wasn't aware at all that I spoiled anything. There is nothing to spoil. The series is amazing. You can listen to it 3 times. It'll still be fresh.